Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. You have tuned in to The Killer Tea, a podcast hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers.
Welcome to The Killer Tea, Season 2, Episode 5. Today we'll be discussing the most diabolical
Israel Keys.
We are your hosts, Christina,
and Chelsea.
and today we are back to being purveyors of some really fucked up bullshit.
Yeah.
This one was by request, and y'all, like, what the fuck?
We're kind of confused, kind of concerned.
Remember several episodes back in the first season where we said it's not a good idea to lump serial killers into a little box? Well, he's kind of the perfect example of that, and I hate to call him unique, but he's kind of unique.
Yeah, he is very unique, and I think that is maybe where the fascination lies with him, is he is so unique and is so against the
Grain, norm.
Yeah.
And he's probably our most recent serial killer.
Yeah, that's very true. Wow. That's crazy.
All right, Chelsea, it's your turn to set the scene. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
All right, girlfriend, talk murder to me.
Israel Keyes was born on January 7th, 1978 in Cove, Utah, to Heidi and John Jeffrey Keyes. He actually had quite a few siblings, and his family was part of the Mormon religion.
Large families are customary. They're not always, but customary.
I didn't write all his siblings' names down, but a lot of them have very religious
Base names like Israel and America. Yeah, that's not the only thing that's unconventional about Israel's family. Just as an example, all of his future siblings and himself were born at home. They don't go to a conventional doctor, nor will they ever see a traditional doctor. And they're all homeschooled, which, none of that is like exceptional or whatever. But if you put it into the scenario that we're describing, it's a little odd. When Israel and his little sister America are toddlers, they drop everything and move. They move to Washington, and on one hand, I've heard that they were very poor and penniless. On the other, I've heard that this was a intentional move, that it wasn't because they were penniless. They wanted to live very isolated in the middle of nowhere and kind of almost like off-the-grid survivalists because of their church that they belonged to.
Well, I mean, when we talk about the Ark, that move makes a lot of sense to me.
That cabin that you talked about earlier took their father 7 years to build with no running water and no electricity. And during that 7 years, the family continued to grow, and they all lived in a freaking tent in the middle of the wilderness in the Washington winters and springs and falls. Like, my God.
To make matters worse, they actually end up becoming neighbors and friends with the family of Chevy Kehoe, who was actually convicted of 3 murders in 1996 and is known for being a gigantic racist pile of garbage.
So Israel is growing up in this totally isolated environment where his only influences are a serial killer, a dad who spends most of his time out in the woods, either A, building a cabin, or B, praying for hours and hours on end, and he's not going to school. He doesn't have any interaction with anyone outside of his church, realistically. And his church is kind of known for being really extremist in their beliefs.
Kind of extremist beliefs. Kind of extremist beliefs.
Yeah, the Ark Church, what Chelsea mentioned earlier, was known for being racist, anti-Semitic, and really primitive. So this all kind of makes sense.
I went down a semi-rabbit hole on this church that they were a part of, and it kind of makes sense. This extremist way of living and these views that they're holding. I mean, I'm not saying that it's okay or anything like that, because it's definitely crazy. Mm-hmm. But the Ark, which is the Christian Identity Center, it's not even called a church. It's a Christian Identity Center. And the beliefs that they were putting out there are just radical at best.
This is not representative of the Mormon faith, so I don't want to give, because we mentioned earlier that they were Mormons, I don't want people immediately to associate that we're saying that all Mormons are like this.
No, this is definitely a case of the exception, not the norm. Mm-hmm. I think that they took the simple living way to an extreme.
As weird as this may sound, I feel like it's worth mentioning that later he becomes an atheist, and he doesn't actually, his modus operandi does not revolve around some sort of racial bias or religious bias. There's actually an absence of that. You'd think his modus operandi would end up being much different than what it actually is all I'm going to say, because we will touch on it.
So that's pretty much what we know about Israel as a child. Everything that is known about him and his childhood does come from his mother. Take what you want from what she says.
You almost have to keep that in mind, because growing up the way that he did in social isolation, there are no character witnesses. And the ones that do exist are part of a close-knit, damn near freaking religious cult. So I highly doubt they're going to be loose-lipped about one of their previous members.
Even though it was current times, they were living in a way that makes it impossible to know what was actually going on. And we're not saying that everyone who lives off grid is going to become a serial killer or a killer in general.
We don't speak in extremes anyways.
No, we never do. This is just a very odd situation.
Mm-hmm. No, oh yeah, it's definitely odd. And not to beat a dead horse, but I did do a little bit of research because I was very curious about the implications of social isolation on a young developing brain. And this was not touched on in any professional capacity in regards to Israel or his case. I just wanted to know for myself. And I did find that psychologists do have a significant amount of research pointing to social isolation negatively impacting the development of a growing brain in ways that are unknown and known to us, but there might have been some meat there that I wish could have been explored in the time that they had. Who knows?
Yeah, we are speculating a lot when we talk about our theories, so, take them with a grain of salt. We're just trying to present the information and figure it out as we go.
According to fact-finding interviews done by the FBI with Israel's mother, around the age of 8 is when we start to see some potentially problematic behaviors. Now, he was trained to be a hunter. He used to catch wild game to put food on the table for his family while his father was off building the cabin and praying. But allegedly, he may have also been torturing those animals. And there was even some rumor of him burglarizing local communities and or neighbors, but nothing was ever on his permanent record, and there was never any punishment in any sort of professional capacity.
Between the ages of 18 and 20 is when we see his first crime, and he actually managed to separate a female from her friends, and he rapes her. He says that he thought about killing her, but decided not to.
By 1998, Israel had enlisted into the army, and I'm not really sure how he got in without a birth certificate and a social security card, but I digress.
Yeah, I don't really know. He must have had something proving his birth.
Like so many other of the serial killers that we've discussed, Israel actually does really well in the military. He's stationed at Fort Lewis, Fort Hood, and even spends some time abroad in Egypt. He gets various different distinctions while he's there. He even passed the test for becoming an Army Ranger. He did really well, and he actually very much so enjoyed being in the military, which is, again, like I said, we've seen that theme happen with a lot of serial killers.
Yeah, he did end up winning. Let me see here. I got a list of his awards. He got the Army Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, a Marksman Badge with Rifle Bar, Expert Infantry Badge, Air Assault Badge, and the Army Service Ribbon.
So the media has made a pretty big deal about these accolades when it comes to Israel, and they've kind of painted him as like a super soldier. So of course, if I have access to somebody that has firsthand relevant experience, I'm going to tap them in. Chelsea and I have a friend who's retired from the Army, and I decided to pick his brain a little bit. And I asked him straightforward, like, are these accolades signs of an exceptional soldier? And he told me that honestly, it's pretty standard for the unit that Israel was in. So take that as you will, but I just thought it was a different perspective than what I've been reading and hearing and seeing. Regardless, eventually the FBI would go on to interview his former Army associates, and they had interesting things to say. They say that during his time there, he was pretty quiet and reserved, and he kept to himself. But on the weekends, he would let go a little bit and drink heavily. He even was a huge fan of the band ICP, which I told Chelsea, oh, case closed. That explains it all.
I'll get the fuck out of here.
Because Chelsea used to listen to the Insane Clown Posse, so I just had to jab her with that little...
I still listen to them from time to time if the mood gets me.
Oh my God, they're so garbage.
Keep your opinions to yourself, ma'am.
Oh, you don't think that explains everything? Because I'm kidding, obviously. Listening to heavy metal, rap, and death, whatever garbage ICP isn't synonymous with, being a serial killer.
No.
It's still garbage.
Oh, but so, he's in the Army. He's doing really well for himself, and he gets honorably discharged, so he leaves with no issues. And supposedly, as soon as he gets out of the Army is when his life of crime begins, but we don't really hear anything about him. It's not until 2007 that he starts his own construction business in Alaska. And he's working as a handyman, contractor, construction worker, kind of all of the above. But it's called KEYES Construction in Alaska. Who moves to Alaska?
Yeah, see, I'm not surprised because he grew up in the wilderness in Washington where it's fucking cold as hell and there is a bit of a icy tundra.
Very true.
He's a survivalist. He's already nomadic and he's pretty much a well-trained killer by the time he leaves the military. So I'm not surprised that he was like, yeah, I can take Alaska. No big deal.
I hate to say it, but yeah. Yes, he was. He even had marksman badges, so...
And let's be real, if you're gonna live in Alaska, you tend to be a different breed. Like, the tundra does not scare you.
That is very true. Nonetheless, he starts his own business, and he kind of uses this business as an excuse to start traveling a little bit.
Oh, it's the perfect cover story.
And by travel, I mean...
killing unapologetically.
Yeah. So it actually takes a couple years. He travels many, many times between 2004 and when he gets caught in 2012. And what he would do is pretty terrifying. He would actually travel to different places and he would make these, what he called kill kits. Mm-hmm. And in this kill kit, it would be a shovel, some plastic bags, some money, weapons, ammunition, bottles of Drano, basically anything.
It was a murder cache. That's what it was.
Anything to help him kill someone. And what he would do is he would find a remote location and he would bury this kit and he would memorize where it was so he could come back to it later.
He buried them all over the United States, all over.
Yeah, and he actually was, I hate to say he was smart, but he was. He never used money from his business to fund these trips that he would take.
And he paid for everything in cash because he already had a very minimal digital footprint because he grew up off the grid and was accustomed to paying for things in cash. So when he decided to become this horrible, disgusting human being, he continued to do that.
But the way he got this money is even crazier because he would rob banks to get the money to make these kill kits and then to travel to commit these murders.
It's this interesting duality because, so on one hand, you have this person who who has taken a lot of interest in other historical serial killers, and he's been trying to learn from them, and he's studied them, and I dare say he's idolized them. He has all this military and tactical experience. He has all the survival experience, and he has these well thought out, elaborate murders. He gets away with them, but then he flips and does these incredibly reckless, risk-taking things like armed robbery and burglary and robbing banks. It's almost like these are two different criminals.
I mean, he was very careful in the way that he would rob banks, and there's almost never any video footage of him committing these robberies, which in the 2000s is a feat in and of itself. He is very careful to hide his identity and to make sure that no one figures out who he is. And he also never commits these crimes in his hometown. And what he would do is he would fly to a location, rent a car, drive several hundred miles to another location, commit these crimes, and then drive back and then fly back home. So it was never a matter of, oh, he's in XYZ location, he's doing these at home. And this, I believe, is truly how he managed to get away with everything he did.
Oh, yeah.
For the 14 years he was doing this.
Of course, because if you think about it, the cops are going to go down their list of usual suspects and they're going to exhaust that list. And usually we're talking boyfriends, girlfriends, jilted ex-lovers. That kind of stuff is usually what they go for. Are they, the people on the fringes of society? Are they prostitutes? Are they this? Are they that? Which actually, during his time traveling, I did find in one of the books that I read, he did frequent prostitutes, but he never admitted to killing any of them. So,
well, here's the thing that really baffles me about him. And when we're talking about in relation to other serial killers, most serial killers have a victim type. With Gacy, it was young men or boys. Richard Trenton Chase, it was anyone who left their door open.
With Bundy, it was pretty young girls with long
brown hair.
Yeah.
The thing with Israel Keyes is he has no victim profile.
He chooses them
completely at random. It could be a couple, which he did kill an older couple, to a young girl, to a man. He would literally look for victims that were in remote areas, hikers, campers, people who are out boating. If he was targeting a house, he would look for a house that had an attached garage, or there was no car or dog. He would basically look for anyone that was convenient.
But if they were a woman, he would rape them.
Yeah, which is also confusing for me. And we know that rape is about control, ultimately. That's what rape is about. I'm curious if he just liked having that control over another person, and that was just one bonus step in why he was killing them, or was the rape having to do with his religious upbringing? Or I don't understand it, because he wasn't raping them for gratification, or at least if he was, he never admitted to that.
So we know that he frequented prostitutes, and he had a child while he was in the military. He had a long-term girlfriend. They were together for 6 years. They had a daughter together after they broke up.
And he was very involved with this daughter.
I have a quote from one of his coworkers saying he would come into work and brag about his daughter. He was a loving dad and a doting father. Everyone around him said that he was very responsible when it came to his daughters, and that was one of the his daughter. That was probably the biggest reason when people were in denial when this happened, was he didn't fit the part to them.
No, he didn't at all. He was in the community. People knew who he was and never expected that he would be able to do these things. But
you think you know someone, but you never really truly know someone as well as you think you know.
Unfortunately, because of the way Israel Keyes behaved when he was caught, we know there are more victims, but we don't know who they are. And that's kind of the scary thing about him. I watched a lot of interviews with him, I'll say that. And the way he talked about his crimes was mind-boggling. But he also kept a lot of the details very close to his chest. And he said that he didn't want anyone to imitate him. And he didn't want the notoriety for committing these murders, which is also at odds with what we know about most serial killers.
I know that at this point we're talking about him as if he has committed a slew of murders, and he has, according to his timeline, and the police believe this timeline. We just don't have names, so we can't say on this date at this time he killed this person or this person. We're just going off what he's admitted to. So while we will eventually get to the names of some victims and some actual crimes that we can say he's committed, just stick with us and keep on the narrative that he has killed several people at this point. We know most serial killers like to act at night, like to be in remote areas away from prying eyes. Homeboy was not afraid to murder in broad daylight. He would go to public places. He wasn't afraid to snatch you up in the middle of the day.
No.
That's fucking crazy.
It's fucking weird, man. Everything about Israel Keyes is a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely everything. And it doesn't make any, like, nothing he does makes sense in the realm of serial killers.
Mm-hmm. After he would get done committing a murder, he would then hurry back home, and he goes under the radar, like what Chelsea was talking about, because these people are disappearing in places where it doesn't make sense for them to disappear. A lot of times the people get written off as like they're just at a friend's house or doing this or doing that. There's no reason why he should be in any of these places. He's being very careful, not leaving behind any DNA, fingerprints, or anything really. He wasn't picked up for those crimes.
I think the only crimes he was ever picked up for was one time he was caught driving without a license and he got a DUI. So he's clearly very good at covering his tracks.
Cops are not looking at this dude.
No, they're not. He's not even close to being on their radar. Everything about this guy, mind-boggling.
In June of 2009, Israel traveled to New Jersey, where he abducted 48-year-old Deborah Feldman and took her hundreds of miles across state lines into New York, where he actually has 10 acres of property, but supposedly did not kill her there. I believe it has been searched. And when he kidnapped her, he tortured her, raped her, and before he strangled her, he actually took a break to go rob a fucking bank and then came back to murder her. Her body's never been found, unfortunately.
Yeah. On June 2nd, 2011, he flies to Chicago, rents a car, and drives 1,000 miles to Essex, Vermont. He ends up targeting the home of Bill and Lorraine Currier. And what he does is he waits until they shut their lights off to go to bed, and then he just attacks them, ties them up, and ends up putting them in his car and taking them to an abandoned house. What's crazy is he ends up shooting Bill Courier. As he's doing this, Lorraine actually gets away from him and starts running, and he ends up getting his hands back on her. He sexually assaults her and then strangles her, and they never ever found their bodies. But what's odd about this attack is that in an interview that KEYES did, he actually said that he had thought about not killing them at all and that he had considered just robbing them, but for whatever reason decided that he would kill them instead. He didn't actually have a solid reason for targeting them apart from he thought they would just be an easy target.
Investigators believe that Israel traveled all over the place and potentially killed people in as many as 10 states. And we already know that he's admitted to driving hundreds, if not thousands of miles to commit a murder. So there's no guarantee that some of these missing persons that come up aren't linked to him. That's, if he has a modus operandi, that is his.
Well, he never gave locations for anyone other than Deborah. Mm-hmm. He refused to tell them where the couriers were.
Yeah, but they never found Deborah.
So, the couriers, that's kind of it. And Deborah's the only other murder apart from the couriers and Samantha that he even confessed to. He said there were others, but he never gave names. He never gave locations. He never gave body locations. None of it. He just refused to talk. And the only reason that he gave up the couriers is because he believed that the cops were already kind of zeroing in on him for those.
The FBI believes that KEYES is responsible for upwards of 11 homicides. It could be more, it could be less, but we don't know. So on February 2nd, 2012, KEYES kidnapped an 18-year-old high school senior named Samantha Koenig. She was working at a coffee shop in Anchorage,
which is his hometown.
Yeah, I say coffee shop, but it's more like a drive-through.
It's kind of like a coffee stand. Yeah. So it's like this tiny little trailer type thing that you can walk up to get coffee. So you can't actually go inside. It's just kind of like it's almost like a food truck that doesn't move, but for coffee.
You've got the window where they come and place their orders and a door at the back. And that's right. It. And it's only you who's typically working there. There's not going to be several people in there. So
exactly.
We have this 18-year-old girl who's just doing work. And he comes up and orders a coffee. And she's going about her business, getting all the stuff together. Unbeknownst to him, there's actually a security camera in the trailer recording everything. But unfortunately, the angle that it's at and the quality that it is, you never get his face or anything on camera.
You can only see poor Samantha.
So Samantha goes to retrieve the money from him after handing the coffee, and she steps back in the recording and puts her hands up. So you're left to assume that he's now pulled a gun on her. And then she turns off the light. So again, assuming that he's telling her what to do, she turns off the light, and then he makes her sit down on the ground, and he actually climbs in through the ordering window, and he attacks her to subdue her. Mm-hmm. And he eventually pulls her out with him, and they go to the car. At this time, he's zip-locked her hands together, but he actually left the zip ties at the coffee stand with his fingerprints on it and her cell phone.
Right. So he ends up taking her back to a shed that is located right behind his home where he lives. And he leaves her there, and he actually goes back to the coffee shop and gets the zip ties and the phone that he realizes he's left there. So he's already returned to the scene once, and he's very lucky at this point that he wasn't caught because...
Oh, well, I guess there's a bunch of reasons, because you can actually watch the security footage There's some people who get picked up and dropped off. They don't suspect anything. Her dad was supposed to bring her dinner. Her boyfriend was supposed to stop by. And I think that's what you were getting ready to mention.
Yeah, her boyfriend was actually supposed to be picking her up. And he goes to the coffee stand to get her, and all the lights are off. And he's kind of confused by this. But he ends up receiving a text message from her phone saying, hey, I got a ride with someone else. Can you let my parents know I won't be home? Which is kind of where the weirdness starts for her family, because that's not something that would be typical for her to do.
Her parents are on high alert. This does not sound like their daughter. All of her behavior beforehand, even though she had been fighting via text with her boyfriend, her father was supposed to come have dinner with her. None of it made sense. So while the parents' suspicions were aroused, that wasn't necessarily the case for police, and it actually took some time for them to really take her disappearance seriously. In the meantime, Samantha had been kidnapped and she was being held hostage in a little shack on Israel Keyes' property where he violated her, he beat her, and ultimately strangled her to death. And right after he kills her, he sticks her into a refrigerator and then leaves to go on a 2-week vacation with his family and leaves her in this refrigerator in the shed.
And this isn't just any vacation. He's going on a 2-week cruise in the Gulf of Mexico with his family and leaves her body in this shed. Now, granted, this is Alaska, and I'm sure it's very, very cold.
Regardless, I mean, he had a refrigerator there ready to put her in it.
Yeah.
So he goes on this cruise and he comes back, and he had initially told her while she was still alive, calm down, don't freak out. I just want to use you for some ransom. Once your parents pay me, I'll set you free. Well, obviously That's not what happened. But no. After he gets back, he decides, I still want that ransom. So he takes her body out of the freezer and dresses her, cleans her up, sews her eyelids open
with fishing wire.
He then positions a newspaper with recent dates on it in the frame, takes a Polaroid picture, uses her cell phone to take a photograph of the Polaroid picture, and sends that to her parents using her phone again. So this way it all looks like she's alive, and he demands $30,000 in ransom to be paid into her bank account because he now has access to it with her debit card. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her parents, they just saw a picture of their daughter's essentially mutilated corpse. And for some reason, this image was released to the public, and you can find it today. I don't understand why.
Oh, it's so horrible.
The only silver lining here is that this ultimately leads to his arrest.
The way her family and the cops handle this is actually pretty smart, because they go ahead and they put the $30,000 into her account, but they alert the bank as to what's going on. So the bank knows that the second any activity is shown on her account, they're to alert authorities, which they do. Unfortunately, by the time the bank is able to call the police and then the police are able to be dispatched to the location of the ATM, he's gone.
For one, I'm shocked that he went for this tactic.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this. So he kidnaps someone that's in his hometown, which he generally does not do. He kills her and leaves her body for 2 weeks, which he also does not generally do. He says he doesn't want to be caught, but part of me wonders, but did you?
Mm-hmm. It's just bizarre. He knows about security cameras. He's been in the military. He has to know about surveillance and intelligence. So everybody knows that if you use somebody's debit card, you can be traced. We learn it so young now, especially at the time that this is happening in 2012. I mean, come on.
Well, he does end up being able to make 3 withdrawals from ATMs local in Alaska without getting caught, but he ends up moving to different states. and using her ATM card in different states. And it's not until about a month or two later that he uses her debit card in Texas, and the camera on the ATM happens to capture the car that he's in, which is a white Ford Focus. And then this car links him to the debit card, and they're able to put out an APB on him in Texas. And thank fucking God for that, because there is a state trooper who is driving down the highway and he sees this white Focus, and thank God he was paying attention. I mean, really, because he goes, that car looks an awful lot like the one we're looking for, follows Keyes and waits for him to make a minor traffic violation and pulls him over. He gets Keyes' driver's license, and it's from Alaska. And they're finally able to arrest him, but they arrest him on credit card charges and extradite him from Texas back to Anchorage on those charges.
Yeah, but that's just to get him in custody. That's all that is.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, Samantha, her body was dismembered, and he dumped it in the Metasuka Lake north of Anchorage. I don't have details on how much of it they eventually found.
I don't know, but I listened to the interview of him talking about this, and he said that that particular lake, it wasn't unusual for people to go ice fishing out there. And when you go ice fishing, it's not uncommon to erect a little shack around you to keep you warm while you're fishing, and then use that cover to dismember her body and put her into the lake.
Yeah, I hope her parents were able to get something, but at the very least, they got closure knowing what happened to her, as disgusting as that is. But
well, on April 2nd of 2012, that's when the searchers found Samantha's body in the lake. And shortly after that, on April 18th, the Anchorage grand jury indicted Keyes for the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Koenig.
During this time, he has to get a mandatory psychological evaluation. And this is where me and Chelsea just go, what the fuck? Because what's revealed is that his intelligence is basically, it borders between average and high, which I'm not surprised.
No.
But they're saying that they did not find any indication of a mental illness.
No. And I mean, we know that there can be serial killers that do not have a diagnosable mental illness. We know that to be true.
We just can't name one other than Israel Keyes.
It's really interesting, though. I'm on the fence of saying that one psychological evaluation was probably not enough for him, and that this is just my opinion, he may have had antisocial personality disorder, which we also know does not mean that people are inherently bad or evil, but we know there is a scale for APD. Maybe he had it, and the lack of empathy and disregard for other human life may have been there. Maybe he didn't have it. Maybe he's just a horrible, evil individual. I don't know. It's fucking baffling to me, quite frankly.
Well, after 30 years of basically listening to forensic files and a season and a half of being a co-host with you and doing all kinds of research, I think this is the first one I have ever come across where they did a modern day psychological evaluation that said, yeah, dude, he ain't got nothing.
We're talking 2012 here. We know a lot more about mental illness than we did in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s when everyone was schizophrenic or everyone was bipolar or everyone is this and this and this.
That's why I'm saying I expected there to be more, even like a dissociative disorder. Because he at one point describes that nobody actually knows him, that he has two separate selves, the one that he presents to the world and the one that he truly is, and that he has never let anyone in to see his true self. And he knows.
But that makes me think of Gacy. I mean, and I don't take the two selves as being an indication of any particular mental illness. I think that he just knew that killing was wrong, but didn't give a shit.
So from the get-go of him being arrested, he didn't want to live in jail. He wanted the death sentence. And part of his toying with police and not releasing information was his opportunity to have some sort of control in the situation. And if he gave too much control to the police, he was not going to be able to negotiate for the death sentence. So that's why the police were pulling out every card they had to manipulate him, to try and make him feel like they were on his side. And
oh yeah, he was interviewed for more than 40 hours by the Anchorage police detective Jeff Bell and by an FBI special agent, and her name was Jolene Godin. And he still, even after 40 hours of them talking to him, was not very forthcoming about many details. But he did say that he had committed murders over the past 11 or so years and ended up confessing to the murders of 4 people in 3 incidents, which we talked about. That was pretty much all he said. He said he probably knew the names, but he wasn't going to give them up.
Israel killed himself in jail by slitting his wrists and suffocating himself before his case could even be tried in court. So,
well, but even before that, I think it's really interesting. In that method of control that he had with the police, he told them that he wanted the death penalty and he wanted it within a year. Which, if we know anything about the justice system, we know the justice system doesn't work that quickly. He also said that he didn't want any of the details of his case being released to the public because he didn't want people to copy what he had done. He didn't want his methods to be studied. And he also didn't want his daughter being able to find the details of his case and what he had done.
Which is absolutely asinine. That you can't do what you did and expect it to be kept hush-hush. That's not how information works. And
it's really weird though. Like, to me, a lot of serial killers, they want that notoriety. A lot of them do. And it's just the way their brains work. But Keyes is the exact opposite. He doesn't want to be a household name. He doesn't want what he did getting out there. And he especially doesn't want his daughter finding out about it.
I mean, I believe the part that he doesn't want his daughter finding out about it, but I also know that I also believe that he's well aware of the fact that he's being taped and recorded, and he's well aware of the fact that this stuff can eventually be released to the public. He's well researched when it comes to other serial killers, and I think it was acting. I think he knew that saying stuff like that would set him apart and would further his folklore after he died. So I don't necessarily buy into that. I think he was very aware of what he was doing.
If you want a real mental trip, the interviews with him are widely available on the internet. And the way he discusses what he did and his crimes is insane. He talks about his murders like someone would talking about the weather.
Which is
That's the
common.
best way I can describe it. He's very nonchalant. He's very relaxed. He would laugh during it. He would make jokes during it. Detective Bell actually asked him, like, why would you do this? And Keyes' response was, why not?
The reward center of his brain was activated by killing people. He didn't value human life. He didn't see it as a big deal.
And there are studies being done on serial killers and looking to see how their brains react to killing, if it's similar to how a drug addict's brain reacts to getting their drug of choice. They're starting to find out that those reward centers are very similar.
I'm not remotely surprised by that whatsoever.
I'm not either. Keyes is often compared to Bundy because they did have, some similarities, and Keyes did really compare himself to Bundy a lot.
See, I don't think they had that many similarities.
They do and they don't. It depends which parts you're looking at.
I think because Bundy has so much notoriety as being like the head honcho of the serial killers, that maybe that's why he kind of idolized him him, but his modus operandi is very, very different. I mean, Bundy carried a kill kit with him, so they're similar in that respect.
Well,
but
I think they're looking at it as, while Bundy, yes, did have a type. He did kill randomly. He did travel around the country killing. But, I mean, ultimately, he's not Bundy. But he even says that, he studied Bundy, but he didn't want to be Bundy.
Again, I just think that he wanted to be able to count himself among them, and he made some choices that would set him apart. But like I said, this guy knew the camera was always rolling.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily buy into the whole that he didn't want the notoriety. I think that's like, oh no, stop it. Don't. You're too much. Please, no. That's kind of how I interpreted it, but I mean, that's just me.
Yeah. I just watched his interviews and found them to be very chilling in the way he talked about everything. I was just kind of like, wow, this is what no empathy truly looks like. Because, we can listen to interviews from other serial killers, but nothing beats camera footage from 2012.
Oh, yeah. No, you get it.
I mean, that is what makes it even worse for me, because I'm not just listening to it. I'm seeing his body language. I'm seeing how relaxed he is. And it's just like, wow.
This is what it really looks like.
Like, yeah, like you really don't give a shit. Wow.
Well, regardless, he offed himself. He's dead. We're never going to get the answers that a lot of families deserve. There's always going to be speculation around him. I think that again, was all part of his plan to once more lead into his folklore and his notoriety, is because there's going to be so many unanswered questions. I think that was a deliberate and intentional choice.
He did leave a suicide note. So he killed himself on December 2nd, which was only 9 months since he had gotten caught. But he left a suicide note, but it was more of a quote-unquote ode to murder. He didn't give any more clues about possible victims. He didn't give any more locations of bodies. It was basically just like, I love murder. Goodbye.
So as of 3 days ago, there was actually an update on his case where he had made basic drawings out of blood of skulls. He used his own blood to paint these skulls on regular computer paper. There was 11 of them. So that is what is leading investigators to believe that there were potentially 11 victims. They think that this is a hint left behind by him. And who knows? All I can say is I hope those papers never fucking get sold for murderabilia, because that's disgusting.
So very weird. So very weird.
But yeah, that's Israel Keyes.
Fucking shit show. So with that being said, where does he fall on the Jeffrey scale for you?
We know for sure that there was one murder. We do not know for sure that those other murders actually were done by him and actually took place. There's no evidence saying that he did do them, aside from his word.
That's very true.
If he did, then I would put him more at like a 7. But yeah, so he's around a 6 for me.
Yeah, he's probably about a 6.5 for me. I think because his utter lack of empathy is so glaringly obvious against some of the other serial killers that we've talked about. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I saw so many interview tapes with him and we don't see a lot of that with other serial killers that we've looked at, that for me, that just hit me in a different way. I'm used to our other serial killers who are like, well, she was a woman. Well, she was a prostitute. Well, they always have some reason why. Mm-hmm. And his response of why not just made me go, ew.
Yeah. Very, very, very ew. Very ew. Oh, thank God, it's palate cleanser time. Palate cleanser. This is the palate cleanser. So it's a picture of Ed Gein, and it says, "Bitch, don't make me wear you."
Oh my God.
I suffer from that syndrome where a neutral expression makes you look like an angry serial killer. Same.
I might regret my tattoos in 50 years, but Jeffrey Dahmer said cannibals don't like tattoos, and I'll never regret not being eaten alive. Oh my God. It says, women like men who make plans, commit to those plans, and still have a few surprises left in them. This is why your girlfriend is obsessed with serial killers.
Oh, God. It's a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer, and it says, I like you. I'll save you for dessert.
Oh my God.
It's a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer, and it says, subscribes to People magazine, thinks it's a recipe book.
Oh my God, no.
Oh, this one's terrible. It's a picture of Ted Bundy, and it says, works for suicide hotline. You don't have to kill yourself, LOL. Where do you live, though?
Oh my God. Every Mindhunter episode, Holden, did you kill her? Kill her. Nope. Holden, we heard your dick game was weak sauce. Killer. I killed her and I ate her arm for breakfast. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Ooh. That really is how they all go, though.
Yeah, basically.
We heard your dick game was weak sauce.
Hello, our sweet, wonderful, amazing listeners. This is future editing Christina. I had to drop in because as I was editing, there was a point in the podcast where I realized you could really hear the distaste in my tone as I was discussing murderabilia. And I know in the John Wayne Gacy episode, we touched on this a little bit, but we've never actually put out a full-fledged disclaimer. And I feel like, why not just do it here and now? We're starting to reach more people and get more engagement, and you guys are reaching out to us and communicating with us, which is fucking unbelievable and amazing, and we love you for it. But we are getting a lot of tags in serial killer merchandise that depicts actual faces and personas of real life serial killers. Now, I know you just listened to us read memes back and forth to each other about serial killers, and we giggled, and it was really dark. But we use that as a method, as a coping mechanism to unpack the severity and the just macabre of serial killers. We don't believe in selling merchandise that makes a profit from Charles Manson's face, from Ted Bundy's face. It's just not for us.
No, now we're not saying we don't support all true crime apparel. If you want to support a particular podcast, or if there's a particular saying from a true crime show or podcaster,
like, stay sexy, don't get murdered. Like, that's fine. That's great.
Totally
Support
fine.
them.
Or, you know, the other serial killer podcasts out there like True Crime Garage or Crime Junkies or Morbid, you know, we know they all have kind of catchphrases, and if you want to support their podcast by wearing stuff that they say or their memorabilia, by all means, please support your local podcasters. But we don't want to see shirts with Ed Kemper's face on it.
But yeah, so, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to touch on. That just came to mind because it's been popping up in our Instagram feed a lot, and we have been starting to get more interactions with people. So I just thought now would be a really good time to kind of say, hey, this is our boundary, you know, we'll respect yours, please respect ours. Keep it creepy, but not too demented. I don't know.
Yeah. Keep it creepy, but not so creepy that we are going, are you okay?
Yes. Yes. But anyways, so you guys know the drill. If you want to get updates from us, you want to get a little bit more BDS, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all at The Killer T. You can send us an email, and we're on TikTok, but we haven't posted anything yet, which is at The Killer T Pod, Pod. That's our only one that's different from all the others because somebody beat us to it. But
yes. Now that restrictions are lifting on the stay-at-home order, hopefully we will be together again
soon.
And we can do the things on the Tiki Talk.
You'll actually see pictures of us together. It's only been 2 months.
And not old pictures. Our behind-the-scene photos are getting very lackluster.
Yes. Sorry, guys. We trying. We do the best that we can.
We actually had this whole photo shoot planned for April.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be so beautiful and fun and provide us tons of Instagram-worthy, gorgeous pictures. And obviously, we had to cancel it.
That'll probably be happening in June, which is what we were trying to avoid, so that way we wouldn't have to get sweaty. But, for you guys, we'll do anything.
Absolutely. So as usual, give us a thumbs up, follow us on our socials, leave us a review. If you're on iTunes, leave us 5 stars. We appreciate you so very much.
All right, y'all. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Join us in the next episode where we discuss Carol Edward Cole,
The Cannibal Killer.